What if the most important naval battle of our time isn't being fought with aircraft carriers? What if it's being decided right now, in the narrow waters between Palawan and the Spratly Islands, without a single missile being fired? China doesn't need to invade any territory. It doesn't need to blockade any waterway. It just needs to stay. Day after day. Ship after ship. Radar after radar. And slowly, the map changes. Meanwhile, the United States and its allies are scrambling to respond, not with bigger ships, but with swarms of autonomous systems designed to overwhelm and outlast. It isn't fleet versus fleet anymore. It's batteries versus bots. Presence versus persistence. And the era of the supercarrier might be quietly ending. So the real question is, has China already won the South China Sea, without fighting a war? The Palawan pivot, how China is rewriting control of the South China Sea. The thriller is on now, low ocean wind. Distant ship engine hum. Radar ping. Here is Clara, bringing the show about the most important naval shift of the 21st century, which isn't happening in the open Pacific, but in the narrow waters between Palawan and the Spratly Islands. Not a massive fleet battle. Not a dramatic missile exchange. But something slower. Quieter. More permanent. China isn't trying to win a war there. It's trying to make war unnecessary. And that changes everything. The Palawan pivot and the death of distance. Let's zoom out for a second. Look at a map. Palawan is that long, thin island stretching southwest from the Philippine mainland, almost like a spear pointing straight into the heart of the South China Sea. And just beyond it, the Spratlys, Scarborough Shoal, Reed Bank, some of the most contested maritime real estate on Earth. For decades, distance protected these waters. China's mainland bases were far north. The US operated carriers from the broader Pacific. The Philippines lacked deep water capabilities. But distance is dying. China has spent over a decade transforming reefs into fortified outposts across the Spratlys, especially on features like Mischief Reef and Fiery Cross Reef. Runways. Radar domes. Hardened shelters. Missile revetments. What used to be rocks are now sensor nodes. And that matters because the moment you build permanent infrastructure, you shift from temporary patrol to structural presence. In 2025, China maintained near-continuous Coast Guard patrols around Scarborough Shoal, showing up on over 350 days of the year. That's not signaling. That's normalization. And when something becomes normal, it becomes harder to reverse. It is the sensor net era of the South China Sea. Here's where it gets interesting. Before, the vast waters were named after China, as the Chinese have been fishing there for thousands of years. Now, China, as a country, stays there. Control today isn't just about ships. It's about visibility. Radar coverage. Satellite tracking. AIS data. Maritime militia positioning. The South China Sea is becoming one giant sensor grid. And when you can see everything, you don't need to chase everything. That's the quiet revolution. It means Western stealth operations become harder. It means fishing fleets become data nodes. It means gray zone pressure becomes persistent. Now flip to the other side. The Philippines isn't standing still. With backing from the US and Japan, Manila has accelerated coastal radar deployments and upgrades to maritime domain awareness. In early 2026, Japan formally handed over additional surveillance radars to help track activity across the Western Philippine Sea, a term coined by the Philippine side to refer to the South China Sea, which Beijing does not recognize. That's not a coincidence. That's the counternet forming. We are witnessing the birth of overlapping surveillance webs, from carriers to kinetic shields. For most of the 20th century, naval dominance meant carriers. Big decks. Air wings. Power projection. The symbol of the era was the American supercarrier. But in contested littorals like the South China Sea, that model is under pressure. Because China has built layered anti-access defenses, what strategists call A2AD. Land-based anti-ship missiles. Long-range radar. Integrated air defense systems. A carrier group operating too close to the Spratlys would fall under dense surveillance and missile coverage. That doesn't make carriers obsolete. But it forces distance. And when you force distance, you dilute influence. That's the essence of what we call the kinetic shield. China doesn't need to sail into Manila Bay. It just needs to make entry costly. The economics of missile math is a must-have knowledge for the Philippines and the United States. It is where the chessboard flips. The US response isn't just more carriers. It is the distribution. The Pentagon's emerging philosophy emphasizes unmanned systems, aerial drones, autonomous surface vessels, and low-cost maritime platforms. The idea is simple: if a $1 million interceptor has to shoot down a $10,000 drone, who wins the long game? That is what some defense planners refer to as attrition by mass. You saturate sensors. You multiply targets. You stretch missile inventories. And suddenly, the economics of deterrence change. Instead of platform versus platform, it becomes swarm versus battery. That's a psychological shift as much as a tactical one. China is redefining the blue water paradigm. Let's talk doctrine. Alfred Thayer Mahan. Traditional naval theory holds that fleet engagements and decisive battles occur on open oceans. But the South China Sea isn't open. It's enclosed, layered, overwatched. And precision technology has changed vulnerability. A $1 billion ship is a visible, trackable heat signature. In a sensor-dense environment, survivability shrinks. That doesn't eliminate big hulls, but it transforms their role. Instead of spearheads, they become nodes within a larger network. Meanwhile, coastal dominance becomes more potent. China's fortified reefs function like unsinkable aircraft carriers. Permanent. Hardened. Reloadable. They don't sail home for maintenance. They sit there, watching. It is the psychological war. Who winks first? It's something under-discussed. Control of water is also control of perception. When Coast Guard ships appear daily. When fishermen are escorted. When foreign vessels are shadowed. A mental line is drawn. Over time, commercial actors begin to adjust their routes. Insurance premiums shift. Risk calculations change. That's maritime psychology. And it might be more powerful than missiles. That is the logic behind America's so-called freedom of navigation, and it is also why Beijing denies it ever stops commercial shipments from entering the waters. We have to review the Belt and Road and security architecture. Now zoom out again. China's maritime expansion isn't isolated from its broader strategy. The Belt and Road Initiative began as an initiative for economic connectivity. Ports, rail, energy corridors. But infrastructure creates strategic leverage. Ports double as logistics hubs. Commercial traffic normalizes presence. Economic dependency softens resistance. In Southeast Asia, development and deterrence increasingly overlap. Palawan itself sits at that intersection. Tourism growth. Airfield upgrades. Energy exploration debates. Economic integration can look benign. But geography doesn't forget. Then we see the rise of sovereignty swarms. Here's the twist. While China builds permanence, the counter isn't symmetry. It's scale. Unmanned systems are becoming cheaper. Faster to produce. Easier to distribute. Imagine coastal states deploying dozens, then hundreds, of autonomous maritime sensors. Not to attack. But to watch. To record. To broadcast. A swarm doesn't need to sink ships. It just needs to expose movements. And exposure erodes gray zone ambiguity. The future South China Sea might not be fleet versus fleet. It might be bots against batteries. Algorithms counter radar arrays. Quantity overwhelms fixed infrastructure. Now let us answer the supercarrier question. Is the era of the supercarrier over? Not exactly. But its monopoly is over. Maritime power is fragmenting. From exquisite platforms to mass-produced systems. From concentrated fleets to distributed webs. From visible dominance to persistent denial. China's increasing control over contested waters isn't about dramatic invasions. It's about layered normalization. Daily patrols. Permanent runways. Integrated missile arcs. Economic embedding. It's about making the extraordinary ordinary. And forcing adversaries to either escalate or adapt. It is the new maritime age. We're entering a new chapter in naval history. The 20th century was about blue water supremacy. The 21st century might be about fortified littorals and autonomous attrition. Palawan isn't just an island. It's a hinge. Between open sea and enclosed strategy. Between fleets and networks. Between the old world of naval grandeur and the new world of algorithmic persistence. And the question isn't who wins tomorrow. It's who adapts faster. Because in these waters, distance is dead. And permanence is power.